In an age of accelerating complexity and digital noise, reason can feel both urgent and elusive. We live in a world that talks constantly, yet thinks rarely. A world obsessed with being right but unsure what right even means. The old maps of logic are still valuable, but they were drawn in a simpler time. Today we need more than precision, we need integration. This is where the 8 axioms of reason come in. They emerged not as commandments, but as reflections, distilled through years of watching thought unfold in personal, social, and spiritual life. These axioms don't aim to reduce reason to a formula. Instead, they invite us to step into a deeper kind of reasoning, one that honors structure without denying soul. We begin where all thought begins, with form. The axioms of formal reasoning. Formal reasoning is the architecture of logic. It is clean, sharp, structured. It shows us how conclusions follow from premises, how statements relate, how contradictions unfold. But even this domain, often seen as sterile or mechanical, hides surprising nuance. Axiom 1. Reasoning is invariant of language. The structure of thought exists independently of the language we use to express it. Whether you speak in Arabic or English, whether the equation is framed in math or metaphor, the underlying logic remains untouched. There is a universality beneath syntax. This idea echoes Frege, who saw logic not as a cultural construct, but as a discovery, something we uncover, not invent. For him, logic was the scaffolding of all language, all thought. Axiom 2. The limits of reason arise from a lack of reasoning. When logic breaks down in public discourse, or in our private judgments, it's tempting to blame reason itself. But more often than not, what we're seeing is not a failure of the tool, but of its application. Descartes, in Meditations on First Philosophy, insisted that error arises not from reason, but from its misapplication, when the will oversteps the intellect. True limitation begins not at the edge of logic, but at the edge of our willingness to engage it fully. Axiom 3. Paradoxes of reason are reasonable. We've been taught to fear contradiction, to see paradox as failure. But in truth, paradox is often the threshold of insight. When ideas loop back on themselves, when they stretch the bounds of definition, they are not collapsing, they are expanding. Gödel's incompleteness theorems prove that any formal system of logic would contain truths it could not prove, and Zen koans have long used paradox not to defeat thought, but to transcend it. Paradox is not confusion, it is complexity knocking at the door. Axiom 4. Reasons are not global truths. A conclusion may be logically sound and still not be universally true. Every logical system begins with premises, and those premises are situated in time, in culture, in assumptions. Wittgenstein, in his later work, moved away from universalism toward the idea of language games, that meaning is rooted in use, and use is shaped by context. What follows is valid within the game, but not beyond it. Reason is local before it is global. Together, these 4 axioms describe a kind of sacred geometry of the mind. But geometry alone cannot build a life. We are not machines. We are human, and so our reasoning must stretch into the whole of being. The axioms of holistic reasoning. This second set of axioms shifts us from logic to life. It brings reasoning down from abstraction and roots it in the messy, radiant texture of human experience. Here, reason breathes. Axiom 5. Reason is an active process. It evolves. It grows as we grow. What once made sense may not anymore, not because it was wrong, but because we have changed. Reason is not a static possession, it is a verb. This view finds kinship in William James, who described truth as what works, not in some mechanical sense, but in a living, pragmatic one. Thought, for James, is a tool that must evolve with the environment it seeks to interpret. Axiom 6. Reason is contextual. No thought stands alone. Every idea we form is shaped by emotion, culture, language, and history. Reason is not an Olympian view from nowhere, it is grounded. Foucault made this point sharply, arguing that what we call knowledge is always embedded in systems of power, in historical and discursive regimes. Heidegger, too, reminded us that thinking arises from being in the world, not from abstract neutrality. Axiom 7. Reason is interconnected. It does not live in isolation. It dances constantly with emotion, intuition, perception, and even imagination. Neuroscience now confirms what thinkers like Carl Jung intuited long ago, that the mind is not a machine of pure logic, but a web of psychic forces. To reason well is to feel well, intuit well, and imagine well. As Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." Axiom 8. Reason is fallible, and this is its beauty. Because fallibility is not weakness, it is the foundation of humility. Socrates knew this. His wisdom lay not in what he claimed to know, but in the depth of what he was willing to question. Nietzsche, too, warned us of the opposite, that convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. To reason is to walk the line between clarity and openness, certainty and surrender. Why these axioms matter together? These 8 axioms form more than a list. They form a lens. They offer a way to think about thinking, to reason about reason, not as an abstract ideal, but as a living human practice. They show us that reason is both structured and evolving, both logical and embodied, both precise and fallible. They restore reason to its rightful place, not as a cold judge, but as a warm companion, not as a fortress, but as a bridge. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that to reason is not simply to be clever, it is to be conscious. It is to seek clarity without abandoning care, to pursue truth without forgetting tenderness. A final reflection. We live in a world saturated with data but starved for wisdom. We can calculate faster than ever before, but we struggle to live with depth. We have algorithms that predict our preferences, but few practices that deepen our discernment. In such a world, reason must evolve, not by becoming louder, but by becoming deeper. Not by dominating emotion, but by dancing with it. Not by conquering paradox, but by learning to live within its fertile tension. These axioms are not an answer, they are an invitation to reason not just with the mind, but with the whole self, to think not only to understand, but to become, and in that becoming perhaps to rediscover what it truly means to be human.